A reaction to the fourth reading of Chapter 2. So, a couple things. One, the scene that Kato was talking about, the fight he got into in the cafeteria, that was inspired by an actual. It really wasn't a fight in the prison cafeteria. It was just a beatdown. So, uh, yeah, this guy just clocked this other guy. The guy dropped like a sack of potatoes, and the guy who hit him just looked at the guard and said, "Now take me to the hole." I found out later what it was about, but it was just like, the guy who got hit just talked a lot. Like y'all saying before, say the wrong thing, consequences. He said the wrong thing, he got knocked out, and the guy just said, just take me to the hole. Like, didn't even care. So that was actually what inspired that. That and also the idea of Kato fighting two people at once is because I jailed with this really nice kid, right? He's a really nice kid, really quiet, very unassuming. He was in there for beating up some cops. He was like a black belt in Taekwondo and beat up like two cops at once or something like that. And so I was like, huh, that's interesting. So I think that's just kind of like bled into the scene. And like unconsciously, those are just things that just kind of like popped up back in my memory, but kind of mutated. Like my memory and my imagination mashed together, and now you have the scene where Kato is fighting two people in the cafeteria. And it's just funny how that works. Like I've said it before, like how art is part creativity, part discovery. Like you go in there with a certain intent, but then there's these parts of you, these subconscious parts that also have an opinion or have some input on what your story is going to look like, and things like that just turn out. So I just think that's a natural part of the process. I think it can be intimidating for some people. I find it pretty intimidating, honestly. Sometimes fun, but sometimes it's just like I don't know where the story is going because all of a sudden I thought I was driving and now I'm in the passenger seat. Let me see. Oh yeah, rust again, right? If there is a sound for when metal turns to rust. Again, I don't know why rust is so prominent in this story. I really like it. I think it has something to do with the sense of age. I think it's because Kato is a young person who is trying to shake off the rust from his soul. He's mentioned, I think, once so far, and he'll mention later, just feeling old, feeling older than his years because of his time in prison, because of all the heartache that he's walking around, because of what happened between him and his grandfather. He feels rusty. And I think because his sentiments, his fear, those regrets, his past is really just driving him during the early course of the story. I think rust was just always on my mind. So I think that's all. Oh, right. One more thing. Cultural stagnancy. I mentioned this in the end of chapter reaction, but I'll just say it again. Being literally the only black student in all but maybe 3 or 4 of my courses during my 3 years in grad school for my MFA, I'm doing a story set in the future where things like racism still exist, and I have to listen to my white classmates say, "You really think racism would exist 100 years from now?" It was so ridiculous. I didn't actually want to address it, but then I decided, I'll just like throw in a little breadcrumb. So that's what the cultural stagnancy essay is kind of pointing toward, how a society can advance in all these ways. Have the internet, right? Like I'm talking to you from wherever you are, from in the middle of my den, so to speak, which is like a science so advanced we take it for granted because it's so common. And yet, I could also go on YouTube and watch a cop murder an unarmed black boy. So having those two things coexist seems very possible to me 100 years from now. Also within the context of I can look up videos from 60 years ago. Like there's this video of Malcolm X talking about a police brutality incident. And honestly, if it wasn't a black and white grainy video and it wasn't Malcolm X, you could imagine he was speaking about something that happened in the 21st century. So yeah, I do think 100 years from now, things could still be pretty gross. But because I was lost to my classmates, and because I think, how can I put this? One thing I learned in my workshops is there rarely ever is really bad advice, or at least advice I can't learn something from. Even the person who's critiquing me, at least it helped me understand who I don't want to listen to. So that was actually a really important critique. Like when she was actually talking about me and not the work, it felt racist. It felt ignorant. It felt really offensive. Actually, I remember that day I went to the professor after and told her, and I told her I will not sit quietly for that again. And she had actually admitted that in class she knew what was happening was wrong, but she didn't know how to address it, which I can respect because it was kind of like fast, but like that was still a valuable lesson for me, to know when to turn down criticism, but also like just like understand other people's perspectives. Like people like see the world differently. So if you're gonna tell a story, I think it's important to at least make an effort to try to close the gap. If it doesn't feel like it's limiting your work or knocking you off your course. So for me, the cultural stagnancy like tidbit was just a way of addressing, yeah, I think it's possible that 100 years from now or 200, 300 years, there'll still be racism or something like that. That seems totally possible to me, without having it drag down the core, the story, because this isn't a story about racism. But I don't know, that was just something that kind of became a big conversation in class around the workshop. So I was like, all right, I'll just sprinkle a little bit of that and let's move on. So yeah, I think making an honest effort to close the gap between you and your audience, whether it's ideologically or philosophically or aesthetically, so long as you're not throwing off your own work, you're not like sacrificing your goal or your mission, is noteworthy. You know, and I think that's kind of the storyteller's responsibility. All right, doses.